Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. Today we continue my top 100 board games of all time. Last time we covered games numbers 90 through 81. Today we're going to be going through games number 80 through 71. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the list. My number 80 board game of all time is Just One. And I get it. This is a top 100 board games. And Just One is actually a party game. Some people might not classify that as a board game, but I use board game as an umbrella term to cover card games and party games, miniature games perhaps even, not so much tabletop role-playing games, but I do feel that Just One qualifies for the list, and it's one of the few party games that's going to make it to my top 100 because while I do enjoy party games, I don't enjoy them nearly as much as the more analytical and strategic-based board and card games that I tend to play. It's a cooperative party style game where everybody's in the same team and one person's the active player and they're trying to guess the word. And they have one word to guess. It's not multiple words. The answer is just one word. And each individual member, their teammates, is giving them a one-word clue. And they're writing it on their easels with marker. And they're revealing it at the same time amongst themselves first before they reveal it to the active player. And they're trying to see and make sure that each of their one-word clues does not match with one another. Because if there's any duplicates, they all get canceled out. And only the unique clues will figure into the process. And then hopefully the active player has at least 2, 3, or maybe even 4 clues to work with. And then they only get one guess. Again, just one. One guess to try to get the answer. And if they do, it's correct and they get a point. And basically they're trying to meet certain thresholds to see how good they are. That's the goal of the game. So if you meet a certain threshold, you're okay. But if you get to a certain other echelon, you guys are amazing. You're phenomenal, right? Really fun. Every time I play it, I enjoy it. Laid back experience. My number 80 game of all time, Just One. My number 79 board game of all time is Downforce, originally designed by Wolfgang Kramer, with many modifications made in recent years by Restoration Games. This is a more methodical, analytical racing game compared to its predecessors, where the racing mechanism tends to be more luck-based, usually determined by dice rolling. This is a card-based game where players are going to be playing cards in order to advance the different colored cards across the track. And each player starts the game with one card, perhaps 2, depending on the player count. And every card you play that advances the cards will not only advance your car, but it will advance all of the other cards on the racetrack. The thing is, they're all going to advance a different amount. So you want to play cards that are beneficial to your cars in the racetrack, but are not so helpful to your other opponents because you are going to help them a little bit, but not quite so much. Now, after certain thresholds, there are 3 milestones along the racetrack. After each of these 3 individual milestones, players are going to make a secret wager as to which car they actually think is going to win the race. And players can double down and pick their car. However, if they don't think they have a good chance of winning, it's probably better and more strategic to bet on another car. And based on how many each individual bet or each individual wager across those 3 milestones will get you a certain amount of money, which are the victory points at the end of the game. And the earlier wagers are obviously more valuable because you have less information to work with. Later on in the race, when you wager, things might be more obvious and apparent at that point. But if you're able to consistently in each of those wagers perhaps have stuck to just one car and that car actually successfully finishes the race and wins the race, you're going to get a huge payoff at the end of it. So it's a great game because even if you do not win the race, if you are smart enough to prognosticate who will be the victor, then you have still a really good chance of winning the game, even though you did not win the race. Really cool game. My number 79 board game of all time, Downforce. My number 78 board game of all time is an old, simple, unheard of game, really, designed by Reiner Knizia, and it's Respublica. And Respublica is a trading game. It's the trading game that a long time ago killed Catan, Settlers of Catan for me, because it's so simplistic, it's so easy to set up, it doesn't take a long time, and it could play anywhere from 3 to 6 players, and it doesn't feel like a burden at those larger player counts. Now, the cool thing about Respublica, it's a simple card-based game, but when you're making trades to the players, you're trying to get different sets. It's a set collection game in essence as well, and you're getting these different sets to earn these cards that will get you victory points. And whoever gets the most of these cards at the end of the game will have the most victory points and will be the winner. But the process along the way, the trading mechanism, is accomplished by offering one side of the trade. When you initiate a trade, you do not initiate it with a particular player. You initiate it in general to your overall audience, all the players, and you make one side of the offer. You either say what you're willing to give up, or you say what you want in return. And then in turn order, all of the other players, all your opponents, will offer the counter offer. So if you offered something, they'll tell you what they're willing to offer. If you ask for something, they're going to ask what they would like for you. And after you've heard all the options, you have the choice to either accept one of those offers. There's no negotiating. There's no altering your side of the offer or their side of the offer. None of that. You got to accept it point blank, just as it was stated. Or you can choose to pass and continue on with your turn. So sometimes you're not going to get exactly what you want, but you might be better off taking it anyways, because you'll establish good rapport with the players, and also because at least you might gain something out of it as opposed to walking out of that turn with nothing. It's a really cool game. It's just interesting. You have to really pay attention to what your opponents want, because you do not want to make dud offers continuously. Oh, I'm offering this. Oh, but why doesn't he take it? Well, remember, he's on the lookout for this particular card, it looks like. And you just keep that in mind as you make your offers and your counter offers throughout the course of the game. Simple game, doesn't get heard of much, but I still have it in my collection and I really enjoy it. My number 78 board game of all time, Respublica. Now we move on to my number 77, and that is Kingdom Builder, designed by Donald X. Vaccarino of Dominion fame. And this game here, I've had a good time playing with it. Donald X. Vaccarino's claim to fame is these modular setups that make the game different from each play to the next. Really cool game. Basically, players have 3 victory or scoring conditions throughout the course of the game, and even that is modular. The base game comes with about 10 different scoring conditions, and every game you're going to have a different configuration of 3 of those cards that tell you how you score points. And a lot of it is you're just settling, putting little houses. They look very similar to settlers of Catan style houses. You're putting them on your different areas in this grid on the board, and you're trying to make connections, and you're trying to connect to different terrain types, or you're trying to have contiguous lines that traverse different terrain types, or that are all connected, or you're trying to have the majority. There's a little bit of area majority in certain sectors of the board. A lot of different ways that you can score points, and it's all determined by the initial draw of those scoring conditions at the beginning of the game. So each game, you're going to map out your strategy based on that draw of those 3 cards, and it's always going to vary from game to game. There's 4 expansions, I believe, for the game, and each of those expansions not only introduce different modular boards to set up the game, but they also introduce different terrain types and different scoring condition cards. Really cool game. My number 77 board game of all time, Kingdom Builder. And now we move on to my number 76, another racing game. We had Downforce just a few spots down. This here will be my preferred racing game, and this is Formula D. And Formula D is a classic game from the early 90s, and this is a much more luck-based game, although there is lots of strategy, but it's rolling of dice, and sometimes those dice will not cooperate. Now, the cool thing about this game is that it has 5 different dice, D10s, D12s, D20s, D4s, D6s, all these different sizes. I believe it's 6, actually, not 5, corresponding with the different gears that you're going to be shifting throughout the course of the game. And you're never going to be able to shift up or shift down too much unless you're willing to take some damage to your vehicle. And there are a lot of things that happen throughout the course of the game that will deal damage to your vehicle. And if your vehicle is ever damaged to the point of 0, then you are out of the race, no matter how far ahead you were, no matter how well you were doing. So that's something to consider. Do you want to get off to a good lead, but at the expense, at the wear and tear of your vehicle? Long term, that might not work. And that word long term is key, because it's probably the reason why I will put Formula D over Downforce. And it's just the fact that I actually like the fact that Formula D plays longer. It's a longer racetrack. While Downforce might be a better actual game, mechanically speaking, and also from the perspective that it's a simple setup and you can get in and out relatively quickly. At the same time, from a racing perspective, sometimes you get off to a really good start and you or another player gets off to a bad start, and you like to know that there's a chance for comebacks. And I have seen comebacks happen. Now, again, sometimes you might start last and finish last, and a longer race might just drag for you. But just knowing that you have the option or the hope to eventually make a comeback, even if you don't finish first, make it interesting for second or third. I find that to be cool. Shifting through the gears, managing your wear and tear or your damage to your vehicle, all really cool elements. My number 76 board game of all time, Formula D. Now we move on to my number 75 board game of all time. And of all the games in my top 100, this is actually probably the game I've played the fewest times. And even so, it made it to the 75 spot, and that's First and Goal. And First and Goal is a football-themed game that I have not played too many times because it's a two-player only game. And sometimes if I don't find the right person to play a two-player only game, I don't play it, right? It's much easier to get solo games to the table, 3 or 4 player games. If I find a group of 3 or 4 players, I'll subject them to that. But this needs to be a game of somebody who understands football. And not everybody understands football. Football happens to be my favorite sport. I'm not nearly as into it as I was 10 years ago, but I still keep up a bit with what's going on, watch the occasional game or parts of games. And I feel like it executes the strategy of football so well. One of the reasons why football is my favorite sport is because the strategist in me finds it very appealing. I find it to be a very chess-like experience between one coach and another coach, the quarterback and the defense. And this game executes that through really cool card play where you're taking playing cards to trigger certain plays. The cards represent your playbook. And then you're rolling dice to execute these plays and see how successful you are or whether you turn the ball over to your opponents. Really well done, thematically speaking, from a football perspective. My number 75 board game of all time, First and Goal. Now we move on to my number 74 game. And this is another game I haven't played too many times, not necessarily because I can't find the right person, but because of such how lengthy it is. And that is Through the Ages, designed by Vlada Chvátil. This game here is such a well-made game. As a matter of fact, this is the only game in my collection that has the distinction of me having bought it twice. I bought the game once, played it a few times, and then sold it because of how long it was, not because of how bad it was. And then after a few years, I got the itch to buy it again. And then I decided to purchase it, and I got it for a second time. And again, I still arrive to the same conclusion. It is such a long game, especially the way it's designed. This is a civilization-themed game. I haven't even said what it's about. Civilization-themed game, classic game from the mid-2000s. It was number 1 or number 2 on Board Game Geek for many, many years. Still pretty highly ranked. Eventually, they had a new second edition with better-looking artwork, graphic design, and components. And that's the edition I own. And it's such a heavy game, such a Euro-heavy game where you're trying to build your civilization all the way from antiquity to modern times. I find that to be so cool, how we traverse all of these different eras or all of these different epochs. Sometimes civilization-themed games are only based in antiquity, but this one carries out into the present day. You have an antiquity age, you have 3 additional ages, age 1, age 2, and age 3. Age 3 corresponds with our contemporary modern times. And it is so cool seeing your civilization build and the fruition of fulfilling your strategy. Very, very satisfying. However, I personally have only played the full game experience one time, and I play a modified version of the game where you only play up to age 2. And sometimes I don't even complete that because it is a lengthy experience, even when you play the truncated, abbreviated form of the game. But it's such a cool mechanism to manage your food, manage your population, manage the happiness. You got to keep your citizens happy because if not, they rebel. And that causes a lot of problems in your civilization, in your kingdom. So you want to manage all of that. You want to manage all of your resources. You want to manage the culture because the more cultured your civilization is, the more victory points you'll gain. And throughout the course of the game, you're drafting different buildings, different structures, different historical leaders that will all help advance your civilization. Really cool game. Again, the length is what's hurting it. but brilliant design. My number 74 board game of all time through the ages. Now we move on to my number 73. I'm sorry, that was my number 74. This is my number 73, and that is Paperback. And Paperback is a deck building game that meets Scrabble. Basically, it's a word building game. You are crafting words. Each card, or most of the cards in your deck, represent letters or combination of letters, maybe consonant blends or what have you. And you're using these to build or construct different words. And first of all, I'm a big deck building fan. I like to read, I like to spell, I like to figure out how words are spelled. I don't really like to depend on autocorrect and things like that. So it challenges me in that respect as well. I want to like Scrabble, but it's an outdated game, and it can be lengthy and very frustrating when people score points because they put their tiles on the right spot of the board and they got a double or triple score, or because they know how to effectively use their cues. Things like that can be a little bit frustrating. It's not necessarily how well versed they are in their lexicon or how good they are at managing the deck building mechanism. But that's exactly what Paperback is. So even if you're not a wordsmith, or you don't know the dictionary backwards and forwards, if you're able to manipulate the deck building mechanisms in this game, you still can have lots of success. My number 73 board game of all time, Paperback. Now my number 72 is a game called Adventur Land. And this is a game designed by the notorious, well, not notorious, but the very popular game design duo of Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. And this is perhaps one of their lighter games. They're usually more mid to heavy Euro style games. This is one of their lighter games. As a matter of fact, it's published by Haba, which is known for children games. This is not a child game by any means, but it is on the lighter side, and some older children can play it. Basically, the game consists of a grid, and you are moving your pieces. It's a fantasy theme. You're moving your pieces across the grid to acquire different things, reveal different tiles. Sometimes you're going to fight different fantastical creatures, and if you defeat them, you could gain some victory points. At other times, you're going to collect different items that will help you in different ways, or mine the mountains and find treasure and score different points. Here's the thing. You're moving across a grid, and you have a certain amount of movements you can make, but the grid, you can only move to it from left to right and from top to bottom. Once you move from left to right, top to bottom, those pieces are pretty much locked in. They cannot regress. They cannot move back to the left or to the top. So there's only movement in one direction. And after a certain while, a meeple that you move all the way to the bottom right-hand corner might have accomplished a lot for you, but that meeple's done for the game because they're on the rightmost, bottommost spot. They're not doing anything else. But if you can manipulate the different meeples that you're moving, your different adventurers, and time them effectively, pace yourself so that you don't do too much too early, but at the same time lock yourself in for the rest of the game. Really cool, really neat, simple game. Doesn't take a lot to figure it out, but strategically speaking, it could take a lifetime to master. My number 72 board game of all time, Adventur Land. And now for the last board game for today's list, my number 71, and that is Bang the Dice Game. Now, many, many years ago, I bought Bang, and I bought it in the big bullet case. And it was so fun because I like the Wild West theme, and I like card games, and I like the hidden secret roles, hidden traitor type mechanism in games. Games like Resistance, games like the classic Mafia, all really fun. However, it was such a lengthy experience that I played it one time. I was so excited about the game, played it one time. We played about a 3.5 hour game. We had some fun early on. It kind of dragged later on. So when I heard that there was a dice game version of it, I bought it instantly. I've had so much fun over the years. It gives you all the stuff you love about Bang, the card game. It gives you the thematic feel, the Wild West, the hidden traitor mechanism, the different teams, people not knowing who's who, all the card play, the attacking people and defeating people, but you do it through dice rolling. And it's a 15-minute game, maybe 20 if you're pushing it, depending on the player count. Really cool. You do Yahtzee style rolling of dice. You roll, you get up to 3 rolls if you do not like what you have, and then you work your way with whatever you end up with. And you can recover health by drinking beer. You can use bang dice to attack your opponents, dwindle down their health. If you are the outlaws, you want to get rid of the sheriff and his deputy. If you're the sheriff and the deputy, you want to make sure the sheriff outlasts till the end. Really, really cool game. My number 71 board game of all time, Bang the Dice Game. And that's it for today's list. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please stay tuned for next video where we'll be covering games number 70 through 61. Comment down below. Tell me what you think about this top 10. I'm interested in seeing what you have to say. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.